Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion. The fit for today is the one that started it all. Let's take a look at a video.
Want to see Dan McClellan straight lie to your face by making a verse say what it's not saying so that he can then attack the text?
All right, let's see it.
Now, the Greek preposition is unambiguous. It literally says on them, which means Matthew is describing Jesus riding two animals at the same time into Jerusalem.
Bart Ehrman makes the same argument in Jesus Interrupted, and while Dan says, oh, the preposition is unambiguous, we would agree. It is unambiguous. It means upon. However, the focus is not upon. The focus needs to be on the pronouns and their antecedents, which these people just like to ignore because then it completely destroys their case.
So, three things to say here. First, this creator has accurately identified an error on my part. I misspoke, and I said preposition when I meant pronoun. The pronoun is the genitive plural afton, of them, combined with the preposition epono, which means upon them. I should have mentioned the pronoun, but I said preposition, and if you watch enough episodes of my podcast, you will see that I frequently confuse grammatical categories that start with PR and have to correct myself. This brings up the second thing. This creator has not watched this episode. They are clearly just engaging with this social media clip that my podcast's editor put together for us, because immediately before saying the preposition is unambiguous, means on them, I quote the King James Version because the King James Version intentionally obscures the plural pronoun, as it says they sat him thereon, which is not marked for number. That was the point I was making in the actual episode, but if you just watch this brief edited social media clip, it does not come through as clear. And this brings up the third thing. This was an episode from 2 months ago, and after this episode aired, there was a discussion online among apologists, among friends and colleagues of mine, about what exactly is going on here. And I have rethought my position on this. So allow me to share what I think now. In this podcast episode, I was sharing what I have thought for many years and what many other scholars have thought, and that is that Matthew is clearly representing Jesus riding on two animals at the same time. Irrespective of the antecedent of the pronoun afton, whether it's the animals or the clothes, and it is unclear, it could be both of them, even if you say they put the clothes on them and they put Jesus on the clothes, it still sounds like he's riding on two animals at the same time. It certainly doesn't clearly indicate he's only riding on one animal. And throughout history, there are many Christians who have represented this as Jesus riding on two animals at the same time. I'm not the first to come up with this. This is something that has been around for many centuries. And so I have always just leaned into, Matthew was just saying he was riding on two animals at the same time. I have rethought my position, and now I actually think that Matthew is exploiting the ambiguity of the pronoun because Matthew wants to represent the prophecy as accurately as possible, and the prophecy, according to an awful lot of scholars, in the Septuagint is not translated well. The fact that its apposition does not come through as clearly in the Greek, and so Matthew is seeing that, and so tells the story that makes it sound like it's fulfilling the prophecy, but also leaves room for some plausible deniability. Hey, the prophecy says two animals. Hey, I explained it in a way that could be understood as two animals. Hey, that's dumb. Hey, I explained it in a way that could be interpreted as only one animal. So by including this pronoun without making absolutely clear what the antecedent is, Matthew gets to eat his cake and have it too. So I think that's probably what's going on here. I've massaged my position a little bit, but this still does not change the underlying conclusion that Matthew is telling the story in a way that can fulfill this prophecy that has Jesus riding on two animals at the same time. They're just also telling the story in a way that someone could interpret as Jesus just riding on one animal.
Now, Matthew 21:7 does state, they brought the donkey and the colt, laid their clothes on them, and set him on them. This is the Greek right here. Notice the two aftons. The first afton is pointing back to the donkeys. The second afton is pointing back to imatia, the cloak.
Not necessarily. That's certainly a plausible reading, and that makes more sense of the story, but it's not a necessary reading. There's absolutely no grammatical or syntactical rule whatsoever that demands that be the antecedent. It is dogma that compels this creator to insist that that is the antecedent. But as I've already pointed out, Matthew's rhetorical goals require the maintenance of the ambiguity, because Matthew wants Jesus to fulfill the prophecy exactly as it is found in the Septuagint, which is a mistranslation that has the king riding on two animals at the same time. So Matthew tells the story in a way that points in that direction while maintaining plausible deniability. I didn't explicitly say he was riding on two animals at the same time.
Luke's account specifies that Jesus sat on the colt, but we keep the same plural pronoun for their cloaks being put on them.
So two problems here. The first is the presupposition of univocality. This creator wants these two stories to each be accurate descriptions of a real-life event that lies behind these tellings. And that's just not supported by any data. These two stories flatly and irreconcilably contradict each other, because the account in Luke has Jesus explicitly instruct his disciples to go find one animal, a colt, a single colt, and to bring it, singular, to him. And then it says they put their cloaks, and that is the only use of a plural pronoun, is the possessive their cloaks on it, singular. Matthew explicitly instructs his disciples to go find two animals, a donkey and a colt. To bring them to him, they put the cloaks on them. So, if Jesus said any of this, he could have only said one of these two different things. Jesus either instructed them to find a single animal, or Jesus instructed them to find multiple animals. This is not a case of, one is focusing on one, one's focusing on the other, or, one's just providing additional information. No, Jesus said, go find me one animal, or Jesus said, go find me two animals. Jesus cannot have said both, unless you want to suggest that this happened on two different occasions. The other problem is that no, the account in Luke absolutely does not say that they maintain the plural pronoun for putting the cloaks on them. The only plural pronoun, again, in the account of Luke is the possessive pronoun. They cast their cloaks on it. So this is entirely inaccurate.
Now, Dan gets the apposition right in Zechariah 9:9, but he ignores the apposition and what Matthew is doing, quoting Zechariah 9:9 in verse 5 of chapter 21. By quoting Zechariah 9:9, he is specifically using that apposition to state that Jesus specifically sat on the colt.
So this is just pure and utter nonsense, because the way Matthew tells the story very clearly demonstrates that Matthew does not understand Zechariah 9:9 appositionally. To understand it appositionally means to understand it as a reference to a single animal. So when you say riding on a donkey, that is a colt, the foal of a donkey, you have one animal in view, a colt. You've described it generically as a donkey, and then you've zeroed in on the specific type of donkey. But the way Matthew tells the story, there is both a donkey and a colt, the foal of a donkey, which demonstrates that Matthew is not interpreting Zechariah 9:9 as apposition, but interpreting it as a reference to two different animals.
So Dan is being dishonest about the language, he is just being dishonest about how pronouns and antecedents work, and he is also being dishonest in Matthew about how the apposition is working.
So this creator has absolutely demonstrated that I misspoke, that I said preposition when I meant pronoun. They've certainly not demonstrated any dishonesty on my part. They seem to think that the fact that they think their interpretation is just so obvious means that my different interpretation can only be intentional deception. And that's just pure and utter nonsense. Now, my thinking has shifted a little bit on this, and I think I am on firmer ground now with my new interpretation. And I'll talk with my podcast co-host about maybe doing a segment where I update my thinking, because my presentation in that earlier podcast episode is no longer adequate. But I want to conclude with this. This creator has never engaged in good faith. I have always engaged them in good faith and respectfully. However, they have never accepted correction, even when it is beyond dispute. They have continually mocked me, and in this video are mocking my appearance. And in the comments on this video, they are liking and laughing at homophobic rhetoric that is at my expense. And so in light of all that, it's quite clear that it is not worth responding to or even being exposed to this creator's content anymore.